Good morning. We have here Professor Rob Jones from the Beatson Cancer Research UK in Scotland. Professor Jones, your biography reads very well. Obviously, you wear an awful lot of hats. Can you just give us a quick overview of your roles, should I say, not just role?
So I'm a medical oncologist. I have a clinical practice. I have a clinical trials practice in medical oncology, but I'm also the director of the Cancer Research UK Glasgow Clinical Trials Unit. We run a number of cancer trials, both locally, nationally, and globally. And I also run a department by which we participate in 200 odd clinical cancer trials within the organisation I work in Glasgow.
And so next week, you're going to be, on the 3rd of December, you're going to be joining us for our virtual session, looking at the impact of COVID on clinical trials in oncology. As a sort of, bird's eye view, to sum it up in just a few sentences, I guess, if you can, what would you say are the key things that have affected your work and the way that trials are run? Looking back to March, perhaps where we are now, and what you see the coming months looking like, prior to us rolling out a vaccine.
So when coronavirus came along, there were a number of immediate threats to cancer treatment and, of course, cancer trials. Primarily, our response was about patient safety, and that takes two elements. There's the actual safety of the drugs used in trials and the total unknowns about the impact that might have on vulnerability to coronavirus. But then there was also the element about maintaining the safety of the trial as a whole. And of course, that brings in issues around resources, the concern that we might be losing large swathes of staff to being off sick or being off on isolation leave. So the initial response was largely to reduce activities where it was considered unsafe. And of course, there was also a demand to redirect limited research resources towards coronavirus research, which has been hugely successful in the UK. And so a lot of our resources were actually directed away from cancer and into coronavirus. For the reasons I've outlined, we also had to reduce a lot of our activities. As the pandemics evolved, we've learned a lot more about the safety issues. We've also learned new ways of working with staff not being in the office. And we're now much more confident about our ability to continue conducting our cancer trials. And nearly all of our trials have restarted. There are still challenges ahead, not least of which because actually at the patient-facing end, a lot of the work practices have changed. So patients aren't coming into hospital as much as they were before. A lot more work's being done by telephone. And so the way people are approached and identified for clinical trials has changed. And we need to continue to adapt our trial protocols to enable that. I think there are also going to be future impacts. There are data that have been lost. There are patients who stop treatment, trial allocated treatments for safety reasons. And so actually there will be implications for the interpretation of the results of ongoing trials.
Yeah, okay. So we'll be playing catch up to an extent.
I think there will be, inevitably there's going to be some catch up. There may well be some trials which are damaged by loss of data. And I think the other factor that we need to understand is there will be implications of the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic going forwards, because there will be less investment in cancer in all aspects of healthcare, because when there's less money available, and that will have much longer term implications for clinical trials research in cancer.
Sure. And I guess as Cancer Research UK, the fundraisers, the events, and so on and so forth must have a huge impact on the funding there. I mean, hopefully, once we're out of this, everyone will get relatively back to normal, but that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, Cancer Research UK is the largest funder of cancer research at all levels in the UK, one of the largest in the world, in fact. And they've made it very public that their donations, their income is dramatically reduced since the COVID pandemic started. Yet we do need to get that back up and running. But we've all, I think, and this isn't just in cancer, across the board, need to face up to the fact that there will be less grant funding available in the next few years, and we're going to have to find ways of working with that, maybe ways of reprioritizing our resources onto what gives the greatest impact.
Just one final question, and this is something that I speak to a lot of people in industry, in healthcare, in research, patient groups, all sorts. The pandemic has taught us many things. The huge and tragic loss of life, will impact all of us, and it'll be a generation that will never forget what's gone on in the last year or so. But bizarrely, are there positives that we can take? For example, the advancement of telemedicine. Certainly from a GP perspective, have we moved forward or leapt forward, perhaps, the years that we could have, something that would have taken 10 years to get to where we are now, maybe we've done in 9 months, in terms of just down to the simplest GP consultations?
We're all, as doctors, we're all operating very differently from how we operated before. And previously, the model was the patient came into hospital, was seen, they went home again, and it was all done face to face. Very little telecommunication used. We now went to almost the opposite extreme, where virtually everything was being done by video or telephone consultation. And I think we very soon began to realize that there were things that were being missed, and that some patients, this was suboptimal.
Okay.
And we're now at the position where we're trying to regain the balance, as we're trying to see the patients who need to be seen and not see the patients who don't need to be seen.
Yeah.
So it's still a learning curve. It's undoubtedly some things are being done better as a result. But I think, we still need to be a little bit cautious, because, the way we've always done it, you change things, there can be unintended consequences, which we may not yet really have fully identified. I think in terms of other learnings, particularly relating to trials, I think, what we have learned is that when everyone pulls together, that actually we can deliver, when there's a real emergency, a research emergency, which there was with coronavirus, actually you can deliver huge numbers of patients into global practice-changing trials in a very short period of time, with a lot of focused resource. But actually, there's also a lot of creativity in terms of using data, routinely collected data, rather than bespoke trial-collected data sets, and ways of adapting platform studies so you could rapidly answer multiple questions. And the UK response, in terms of both the treatment of coronavirus and the vaccines, has really, in many aspects, led the world.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is what can we learn from that in terms of our trials processes, the growth in bureaucracy behind running clinical trials, when you can set up a 12,000 patient study in the space of 10 days. Why does it still take us 18 months to do it really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, listen, it's great talking to you. I know it's a bit of a quick few questions I've thrown at you, but you're going to join us next week on the 3rd of December with a few other panelists, where we can delve a little bit deeper. Look forward to seing you then.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Bye.